So thank you so much, and thank you also for organizing this training. I think it's one of the most key trainings for any company that's doing. At the end of the day, we're dealing with customers. You don't have any shortcut. If you're dealing with customers, users, if you're in business, number one, of course, and you're dealing with customers, you must ensure that privacy and security is your key, is one of the key areas that you have fully invested in or you have fully implemented in. And of course, there are some few, so I'll just touch on GDPR a bit, PDPL, as well as Hedera lab, and how Hedera is very, plays a very big role or can be an enabler to privacy and security. So going straight, so I'll try to keep this session not so long. I'll try to cover it within maybe 40 minutes, and just to show the key data points and the key things that you need to check out for. Just as a way of introduction, I'm George Miner, and I'm the CEO and the founder of Shamba Records. So Shamba Records, we are bridging the 300 billion digital gap in Africa's agricultural market. We do this by providing a blockchain-powered traceability tool that runs on Hedera, whereby we're able to track data from the farm level to aggregation all the way to the distribution, and the distribution is maybe through the regional markets or global markets. And so far, we have about 50,000 plus users or 50,000 plus farmers. And of course, we collect many key data points like the farmer biodata, production data, economic data. So you can tell that we have to be fully, in terms of, we have to be fully uh, secure proof of the data as well as maintaining the farmer data privacy. Besides that, as a company, we've been able to partner with Google, as well as we've been able to work with World Bank on a number of projects. Of course, right now we're working on it. We're working together with Hashcraft and Hedera, especially on on-chain traceability, making sure goods can be able to be tracked and can be able to be traced. So I'll just jump straight into it. And why privacy and why does security matter? And this is one of the key questions that you should always ask yourself when you're building any product, whether it's a software product, whether it's a physical product, because at the end of the day, if you're transacting with users or with customers, you must be able now to make sure that you protect them. Because in today's world, data is the heart of every innovation. And but also with great innovations comes great responsibility. Because you hope your product whatever you're building will be able to attract millions or thousands of users. So you must also have a great responsibility handling the data. And we will explore the core reasons why privacy and security are non-negotiable. You cannot build a solution without factoring, privacy and security, which is what we call non-negotiable for startups as well as for any successful enterprise. We'll start with one of the core reasons. Right now, there's a very huge increase in data risk because the more data that you're collecting, the more you have to protect. And right now, there's so many. If you have data breaches, if you have leaks or any unauthorized access, then your business faces a major risk. And also, if it faces a major risk, they can even shut down or you can be able to be sued, as well as you can be able now to lose your users. Number two core reason why you need to make sure your privacy and security is key. You must build trust because trust is the new currency. Users will always go to a platform because number one, they trust it. They must that they know that their data is safe, that you're not going to sell your data to maybe to other third parties, and the users will not get maybe funny advertisement, funny messages, this because you've been able to maybe sell off their data. So number one, you must make sure that even users, when they're joining your solution or the problem you're solving, you're able now to advocate or you're able to showcase trust. And then the other of course is number one, compliance. Once you're fully compliant, it also makes your journey, whether it's your journey to expand or to scale to different markets, makes it very easy and makes your growth journey to be easy because if you're compliant maybe with GDPR, you're compliant with Kenya data protection laws or any other type of laws that are there in terms of data, then you can be able now to quickly grow to different markets. So moving like understanding like what are some of the data protection laws that have been put up there. Of course, there is the famous GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, which if you're expanding or you're dealing with, as much as maybe you're based off maybe in Africa, you might also have some customers or some users, whether directly or indirectly, in different regions or in different continents, such as Europe. So you must make sure that you adhere to the GDPR set of protection laws. And also, of course, in some markets, such as in Africa, such as in Kenya, there's the Data Protection Act, which is the PDPL, which again, they're designed to give individuals the control of their personal data. And these laws are set on core principles that you must develop again on. So, like in Kenya, you have to register with the Kenya-based Kenya Data Protection organization, which is a government-led organization. So you must make sure that even when you're operating, you don't want your business to be shut down just because of a data leak, or you don't want to be sued. So some of these laws they're quite very simple and they're quite very straightforward. So when you're building and when you're onboarding users, consent is key. Consent data. So make sure that guys sign up, they tick on maybe the terms and conditions include above now, them giving consent to be able now to use and also maybe to process their data. So make sure that you put it out there to avoid any future maybe legal cases or to avoid to be sued. Number two is on data minimization. Only collect what you need. Don't be fascinated because you have this user, you can be able to access other forms of data, but just collect what's relevant to your application or relevant to your field. And that will also help you not to have unauthorized access of data that maybe the users might get a point of suing you from. Number three is purpose limitation. Again, what you stated on the terms and conditions, make sure that you just limit your scope of work or scope of use of that data into that. Because if you stretch it further, of course, you're opening your ways into uh you're opening your ways into ways maybe you can be able to be sued, or you can be able to attract maybe threats or points of attacks. Again, confidentiality and integrity. Keep the data accurate, keep the data safe. Confidence is everything, whereby make sure that whatever data the users on the platform maybe gives you consent to, it should not be found out maybe from the data breach, or the user should not find out that the details are out there in public. So make sure that these four key principles, the user consent, you have been able to fully implement it, and the user have given you the authority to consent. Data minimization, collect what's necessary, and again, purpose limitation. Don't extend your scope, use in that particular scope, and again, integrity and keeping everything in confidence so that you make sure that you have a long, sustainable um, connection also with your users. And then number two, on one of the principles is the user rights. So remember, just because you have the user data doesn't make that doesn't mean that the data is yours. So remember, at the end of the day, maybe your work is just to process the data, and the laws, like the ones I've mentioned, like the GDPR, the PDPL, is that they grant the user the powerful rights, and so you make sure in your system that you can be able now to allow the user to rectify and also edit their data, and most importantly, allow them that their data can be forgotten. So in that case, it's like meaning that you can be able to delete their data. So again, user rights. Remember, you're just a data processor by high chances. You don't own the data. The user still retains the data. So provide the provision to be able to edit as well as to be able to delete or to forget the data. And again, this quite very straightforward is the impact of non-compliance. If you don't adhere to the sets like the GDPR, the PDPL, of course, the government will come after you. You'll be sued by your users, you'll be sued by your customers. And of course, you guys have had cases whereby Facebook, Google has been sued in Europe. They've sued billions and billions of dollars. And you don't want to attract in some places whereby countries they give you a penalty of 4% of your global turnover. And since you guys are starting up, make sure that you adhere to this. And some of this you find even getting a data protection license. It's not even expensive. In major countries, I think it goes a lot, maybe to like 50 US dollars at most. So it's better you just pay for 50 US dollars and adhere to the set policy. So you avoid getting penalties or getting sued. Number two, of course, uh, um, customers, users get to know there was a data breach. Of course, that would destroy your reputation as a as a company, as a startup, as well as a person, the guy behind it, if you're the founder. And these also will can also affect maybe your future engagements in any other organization. So I try to avoid that and make sure that the privacy and security is key so that you can be able to protect your reputation because reputation is everything in business. And of course, in African context, different countries also they're putting up different data laws. So make sure you understand even when you start expanding or even whichever country that you're building at, you can always say that you're adhering to the set data policies that have been set in this maybe particular region or in this particular country. Now, so where does Hedera come in and what's the strategic advantage? Of course, Hedera is an enterprise-grade public ledger that can be powerful and unique solutions too, especially to the challenges of data breach, data manipulation, and you can use it as a layer to be able to protect your data as well as to make sure that you're fully compliant and nobody can be able to have the access or to avoid any type of data leaks. Of course, number one is Hedera is built to solve real world problems, and that's why it has the speed, the efficiency. The speeds are very high, and then it's stable, it's secure enough to be able to protect your enterprise or to be able to protect your solution. And again, as I say, it's secure enough for you to be able to store your records so that they cannot be able to be manipulated. So you can be able to store immutable record storage on Hedera. And these can be able to help you even to track any changes or to have an audit trail that proves that the document was stored maybe on Hedera on chain and it wasn't manipulated. And lastly, of course, Hedera compared to the other chains, of course, it has an advantage. It has the near gas or near zero fees, whereby your transaction costs are very minimal. And of course, we're talking about energy efficient. But the most important part also for any organization at this particular point, as any project at this particular point, is the low cost fees of maintaining a record or maybe maintaining, yes, maintain a mutable record on Hedera. And but how do you go about it? How do you store the records on Hedera? What would be the key? What would be the key guide or the conceptual framework? So number one, of course, you can't. So the Hedera has the public ledger, and you have to avoid to store any sensitive data on the public ledger. So for the public ledger, what you need to do is to have a very smart strategy. So you should be able to have like a private database. So the private database is where you collect your sensitive data, maybe the customers or the user, maybe bio data, maybe location, and you store that type of data on the private database, but you don't store it on the public ledger. This to avoid anybody to access the data without any authorization. So the first thing that you need to do is to have like a private database whereby you store the actual encrypted personal data. And here we'll be able to have flexibility to be able to update or delete the user information, respecting their privacy rights. So you have it's like a sandbox whereby before uploading the final, maybe verified, or before publishing, uh, you make sure that everything that you before it goes to the public ledger, it has been cleaned or has been stored well on a private database. And then from there, the second step, of course, is moving the data, store it in Hedera ledger. This is where you store the unique digital fingerprint or hash of the encrypted data. So that means the data that goes on chain to be an immutable proof that the record existed without revealing the record's content. So this again, so the private database is where you prepare before you go to the public ledger. Because the public ledger, once you store the data there, that's a permanent record and it cannot be easily be manipulated. So again, before you do anything, especially when you're dealing with the user's data, be very careful on the type of data that will be able to go on chain. So make sure that you have a private database like a sandbox whereby you do the data cleanup, you pick up, and then you pick up the key points that can be able to, or the key data points that you can be able to create a digital fingerprint on it. And then once you create that digital fingerprint, it's when you are able to store that data on the Hedera ledger. So, second point is storing the records on Hedera. How do you go about it? So the first, Hedera has a number of services. The Hedera Consensus Services, the HCS, is the Hedera File Service. So on it has its own purpose. And like the Hedera Consensus Services, the HCS. So this is like a digital notary. So this is where, remember the last step that we've just talked about, is where you store or you log the hash of the encrypted data. And once you store it on the HCS, this creates a permanent timestamp record of existence. So that means everything that goes on HCS, make sure it's the correct detail because it goes to HCS, or maybe there's some information that was not supposed to go on HCS. That means now that record you cannot be able to, you change it or manipulate it. And if let's say, for example, you were creating maybe like a customer identity, like a verifiable credential of a customer that can be used across many industries, that means that you cannot be able now to edit or you cannot be able to manipulate it. So the goal is to be able, again, use the private database and make sure that private database, once you're satisfied with the fingerprint that you're creating and the hash that you're creating, that's when you store the message, that's when you store and you log the hash and the data on HCS. Then number two, moving to Hedera for a service. So Hedera for a service, let's say for like now as Shamba Records, we deal with a lot of farmer records or producer records or user records. These records can be the harvest records, it can be the quality, it can be the quantity. So quantity and quality of the produce is not that very sensitive. So and but it's very key so that you can be able to verify. So that type of data needs to go on chain. But but you see, it's not harmful. Like now, the quality of coffee harvested or the quality of any produce is quality A. There's no harm in mentioning the quality because it doesn't affect or it doesn't infringe on the user rights or the user privacy. So Hedera for service is maybe you want to store huge files and they're still also using HCS to get and you just using you have a large database and again the key data that needs to be there like the quality, the quantity that will not be able to infringe on the customer's rights and user privacy. And of course, the third point is access control. So on your header for service as well as HCS, you need to, of course, to have the special keys and permissions to control, can read and write on the Hedera services. So you have to add another layer. So whoever that you've trusted to be able to be logging in or to be able to log the data, the encrypted data, make sure whether it's you or maybe whether it's your CTO or whether it's your dev, make sure it's a trusted person because of course uh, humans are quite sometimes the weakest link. So make sure that uh, whoever has the access control is someone that, of course, can be trusted. Now, moving to now hands-on lab. So how do you go about it? How do you create this fingerprint? How do you go before you hash this data to HCS or Hedera file service? So the first one you must be able to capture the key important information. So the first step is you must capture the user information. And then after you capture, the second step is to encrypt it. After you encrypted the data, the third step is to be able to create a digital fingerprint and place it on a Hedera network. So, so you must follow this process. So you capture the data or the user information, encrypt the information so no one can be able to read it, and just store the fingerprints on the Hedera network. And then after capturing and encrypting the record, you must you must make sure that your application captures the right user information. Like in our case, we capture the farmer name, the farm size, and their certification number. Then the analogy is very simple. It's just being able to capture that data, like the key farmer name, their farm size, their certification number. You put it in a box and you lock that box in short, like the private database. And you use that you use that special secret key and nobody can be able now to access this type of data at any particular point. So it's very, 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 very uh, uh, private as well. So, so after you've been able now to encrypt the key and you have the security key, is to make sure that nobody can be able now to access or now nobody can be able to read this or can be able to access the data or encrypted record without this special key. So you understand what I mean is you start with the analogy, what kind of key data points I'm going to store. And then after that, you use a special key or you grant very few people access so that nobody can be able now to access this type of data and all people can be able to read it. Mm. So the third step is after that, we have captured the data, we have been able to store this data maybe in a private database. is creating the fingerprint. So the fingerprint will be created out of now the private data sets of in short, like what I've mentioned, like the box. So you have this fingerprint, and this fingerprint is the one-way code or one-way code a hash. So once you have this fingerprint, you cannot be able to change it because you've been able. Remember, as I said, before you store anything on HCS or Hedera file service, you must make sure it's the final detail, it's the final print. So because if it's the final print, once it's stored in HCS, you cannot be able now to edit or even to manipulate it. So that's when after that, now you've created the fingerprints. And that's when you take it to the Hedera network, and this gets an official tamper-proof stamp of authenticity. So this means once you store the data, that means that record will stay on Hedera for service or HCS, and anybody will just come and check, and they'll be able to see that this was logged in, and anybody can be able to see that fingerprint, but they cannot be able to unlock it, or they cannot be able to see it. But now that means you have stored the data in a very safe and secure manner. So it can be like now, the fingerprint can just maybe display the quantity of produce, but it cannot be able to display maybe the other details like the farmer name, or the customer name, or the customer details. Then the other part is, remember, your solutions need to be audited. And let's say in the age of data protection, so many companies are being audited for data leaks, as for privacy infringement. So you must make sure that an auditor can check your private database for the encrypted record, and then they can create a new digital fingerprint and compare it to the one on Hedera. So even when an auditor comes, they can check the private database, use the same database that you've used to create your original fingerprint, and store it on HCS, and they can compare. If they compare and they match, that means your details are not being tampered with. But if they compare and they don't match, that means your data has been tampered with. So, so make sure that whatever you're doing, even when auditors come, because you'll be audited maybe at one particular point, if you're dealing with a lot of user information or user details. So make sure there's the need of auditability as well as the right to be forgotten, so that you can make sure that even the actual data that maybe it's on your private database, as I mentioned, that data can be updated or can be deleted. So because you don't want to have, once the auditor comes to you, you don't want to have challenges with that. So what are the key takeaways? So as you continue building, coming up with the different solutions, make sure you're compliant. Because if you're compliant, you avoid many issues along the way. And one of the issues is being penalized. The other issues is on data leaks as well. As well as besides that, also have a trusted business, and users will be comfortable using their solution. Because at the end of the day, you remember you're dealing with customers, because uh, you're building for the users. Even and if the user cannot trust you, if there's a data breach, that becomes a problem. But if a user can be able to see this company is fully compliant, they're following up maybe the GDPR, then or the PDPL, then they'll be comfortable using your solution. Then number two, of course, encryption is your first line of defense, because it will be able to help you and it will be able to help you to store sensitive information, and will also help you to maintain the data and confidentiality. So make sure always to encrypt sensitive data before you store it or you use it, because this will help you and will also protect you for many future problems. So number two is just making sure that encryption is your first line of defense. Before encryption, before that, make sure you're fully compliant. And then, of course, Hedera plays a key part because it will be able to help you to store sensitive data that cannot be manipulated on HCS or whether it's the Hedera file service. So as you know, Hedera provides a very perfect, low cost and secure way to create an immutable audit trail for your data, allowing you to build real-world and compliant applications. So the key takeaways in privacy is number one, there's no shortcuts for compliance, especially we are living in the data age. Right now, there's so many AI tools that are coming up and they're looking for data to be able to train their models. So you don't want to be that part whereby there was a data leak and then uh, customers' data were used to train different AI models. So make sure that you're fully compliant so that you cannot be sued. Number two, of course, to avoid sensitive data getting out there, make sure that encryption, they're fully encrypted. And of course, whatever it goes on Hedera, uh, it's of course to be a permanent record and to be good for the audit trail. So as you continue on the hackathon, make sure that you adhere to that. Of course, we don't expect a lot of uh look GDPR compliance or PDPL compliance at this particular level, but for maybe existing organizations, this is something that it's quite non-negotiable. They should make sure that they adhere to this. But for the ones who are just building, spinning up a projects, of course, encryption will be one of the key things that will help you and protect you. So, since you have this knowledge, just start thinking about how you can be able to integrate those principles in your solution, in your projects, so that it can help you for now and also for future purposes. Because of course, we hope that every project that's been done will become successful at one particular day. So make sure you are able to adhere to the set policies, even when you launch maybe to new countries, and even when guys are signing up, of course, those terms and conditions are quite very key. So, of course, number two is once you've been able to focus on the customer side, of course, you have also to focus on your internal side as well. Um, who manages now the encryption keys? So you have to also have reliable people, a reliable team that you can be able to trust. Because also remember, most of the leaks or most of the most of the leaks or data breach sometimes can be have some internal sabotage in some way. So think about your team, think about who do you trust to do this, or what the measures that you can be able to take uh, that it protects you. And I think once you've been able to cover the first point, whereby you're fully compliant, number two, you've been able now to have your own internal compliance. So internal compliance is making sure that you're aligned or you have the right people, the right team, the right details that they cannot be able to expose you, they cannot be able to lead you to a data leak. And then after that, of course, you have a very foundation, a strong foundation of privacy and security. You can continue building, scaling your solution, and at the same time, you're protecting your users, you're growing your business. So I believe, in short, is just make sure you protect the customer's data. You protect, make sure the customer also knows they have the right to be able to their data to be forgotten. So they cannot come later on in future to blame you or sue you. And then I think with that also will give you the confidence to scale to build a global business or even inter-regional business and serve multiple and multiple of users and customers. So as I said, I'll keep it short because I think these are one of the key areas that any business or any project should put in mind, especially in this data age. is that you adhere to that. So just welcome a chance of a few questions, maybe two or three, where I can be able now to respond. But thank you guys for listening through. I think this is one of the areas that will help you along the way, no matter in this project, but even in different projects in different companies. These are some of the areas that you need to make sure, even when you're working for an organization, they're being able now to fully comply. They are not any um, manipulation or data manipulation. Uh, yeah. So for now, I think the floor is yours. I welcome maybe two to three questions. And thank you so much for listening.
Guys, please do not hesitate to raise your hands so we can, George will can answer all your questions. I think we have the first one with zero. Yeah, feel free. Let me open for you the mic. Yeah, guys, you have access to your mics, so please do not hesitate to intervene.